Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have in the studio this morning Art Johnston. Art is the 4th District School Board member in the 709 School District here in Duluth. Welcome, Art.
Hey, thank you, Marcy. Great to be here as usual.
Good to have you here again. Art, I'd like to have the viewers know a little bit about your background. You've been on the school board now since, you're in your second term. And so you came in kind of on the end of the Red Plan implementation. So your first 4 years was a lot of what was going on with the Red Plan, and then your second 4, the first half of it was finishing up of it. Is that correct?
Yep. I got elected in 2009, and that was the issue going on at the time. I kind of got elected for trying to keep our local community schools open, like Morgan Park. I fought real hard. Unfortunately, we didn't have a majority on the board. We thought we had, but then when we got on there, some people decided to change after they got elected again, and so we ended up having a 2-5 board instead of we thought we had a 4-3 board when we got elected. So anyway, that went on, and of course we weren't able to keep Morgan Park open. We lost things like Rock Ridge. Of course, we lost Central High School, and it's so the rest is kind of history. I wanted to. We had other groups. There was a group called the Red Plan Plus. They wanted to change Central into, say, for example, a 7-12 school, or even a K-12 school. And I was in favor of that too, but again, we got railroaded by the superintendent at the time, Keith Dixon, and the board. We didn't have enough votes to make any of those changes. So then that was the first 4 years. Of course, we've seen the Red Plan develop. We've seen schools close. We've seen hearings that came out that were kangaroo courts, and they closed these schools. And I think that they took the 3 high schools and went down to 2. The idea was to close Central. Of course, Denfeld then moved up to Central the first year when they were remodeling Denfeld. That was 2011. And then they closed Central, and now everybody's back to Denfeld. And so it's caused there's lots of moving around, getting people weren't happy. We ended up losing a lot of students then. We're still losing students now. It was not a success. All the concerns that I raised about the Red Plan, I think, have all turned out to be true, unfortunately. And we're still losing students. We're record low students. Almost every month we have a new record low in the Duluth Public Schools. So the next year, of course, then people didn't like it. They kind of went after me because I was speaking up and talking about our student loss, talking about our deficit spending, and they didn't like that, and then they decided to remove me because I didn't toe the line, because I made up a bunch of garbage. And but I weathered that very well, and it cost a lot of money. Unfortunately, the school spent a lot of money, legal fees, to try to remove me. Obviously, they couldn't because, hey, this is an unelected position, of course.
Causing more deficit spending, of course. Let's use our money wisely, shall we?
So the last 2 years, we have had a new board that people went after me, decided not to run, which was the best thing that ever happened to the school. We had 3 very nasty people. And they didn't run again, and now since then we've actually talked about education. We don't agree. I'm still in a minority, but I think we've had every once in a while they make the right decisions. In the last 2 years we've been able to put agenda items on, believe it or not. Minority could not get any agenda items on. We've managed to change that, and we've got all the meetings now are publicized, and we've managed to do some helps on the budget, not enough, but we've moved in the right direction to try to stop pulling money out of the general fund. The big issues, of course, we're still losing students, losing money, and deficits, and certainly we can talk about that. But so anyway, I decided to run again. Some people wondered why, and I'm doing it because I think the Duluth schools need me. We need to have a little bit of pushing back. We need to checks and balances on the superintendent. We need to have a better community interaction. We need to be able to talk to people and encourage them to show that we want them as parents and their children to participate in our schools. And I think it's critical to have a strong advocate for changes in our school, because we do have to change. And I think, you know, the Denfeld issues that we've got, the lack of enrollment, the issues we've got on the lack of equity in Denfeld, we need change. We don't want somebody else there just saying, oh, everything is hunky-dory. Now, we want to be positive about stuff. I mean, this is our school. We want to encourage people to come. But we also have to address our problems. You can't address problems without talking about what the problem is first.
And that sums up a lot of what has been going on, is people have wanted to bury their heads in the sand and not look at the reality of what's going on. And I know from talking to you recently and reading some things, we've got a very large disparity between East and Denfeld. And we have a lot of, and the young man said it in the newspaper the other day, a lot of absenteeism at Denfeld because he can't read. He is in the 12th grade. He cannot read. Is there something wrong with the educational system in this area? It's not just Duluth, by the way. This is nationwide. But that is why parents are pulling their kids out and turning them into any other district they can find. We have open enrollment, and those open enrollments in most of the districts surrounding us are full. The charter schools are full. The Christian school is full. Everybody's full, but our wonderful, shiny new schools. And so you have some of the background, and you have some of the tools to fight it, and a lot of it has been your opposition to what has been going forward. You have not sat back and said, oh, everything is just fine. And that's what we need on the district. We need people like yourself who are willing to say there is a problem here and we need to address it, we need to look at it. Now, I'm not asking you for solutions, because I know most of your focus has been on budget, where did the money go, and trying to get agenda items on, which it's exciting to hear since I stopped filming here back earlier in the year, that you're now getting things on the agenda. That's been a struggle since the very beginning. They didn't want the minority like yourself to have a say in what was going on. So you fought hard, and it's commendable that you want to run again, Art. I really appreciate you doing that, and I'm going to wish you the best and do whatever I can to help you,
well, thank you,
to achieve that. And so let's talk about some of the very most current things that you and I have discussed recently. Certainly this business with Woodland Hills moving over to Rockridge and costing us about, what, 1.2 million or 2.2 million?
3 million.
Now 3 million. When they already own the building, Cobb School, now they've turned around and made a promise to Many Rivers Montessori, which they are not going to be able to fulfill, because I understand that issue has been tabled. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the mulch issue, because that went from a few $100,000 to over 1.2 million. And so where are we at with some of these issues that are really facing the district right now?
Well, the moving to Rockridge, Woodland Hills to Rockridge, that's going forward. I believe it's I think kind of unfortunate in a way. It's not really sound economically for us to do this. We had an opportunity, Woodland Hills, they have the old Cobb School, which they bought from us, I don't know what, 15, 20 years ago. And they needed upgrading on that. They wanted to get more rent, because we actually pay them rent because we supply the teachers. These are actually students that are enrolled, and they count on we get aid from the state for all their students. And rather than pay them extra rent, we decided to, okay, let's take Rockridge, which was a school that was closed during the Red Plan, and we decided to fix that up then and make it suitable for Rockridge. for Woodland Hills. Now, the problem with that is that we do save some of that rent. They're not going to be paying us rent. Or we're not going to be paying them rent, because it's our school. But along with that, it's going to take $3 million in repairs. Just getting it has been empty for 5 years. We had issues before. I think even on the red plan, Johnston Controls said it was going to cost $3.5 million. Well, it's still going to cost that much money to repair, because we don't want to have a school that doesn't have all the good facilities as do all our other schools. So these kids need good facilities. But it's going to be $3 million. We're going to have to provide food. We're going to have to provide kitchen staff. We're going to have to rebuild the kitchens. We're going to have to obviously provide custodial staff. We'll have the utility bills are probably going to go up extensively, just because we're going to be putting in new HVAC systems. So that's going to probably double our utility costs, just because new systems are very energy intensive. And so it's going to cost us more. And from an economic point, also we're not going to be able to sell it. Originally we were going to sell that for $1.9 million. We're supposed to go in and help pay off our debts, so now we don't have that. So economically it's kind of not a good deal. We're kind of between a rock and a hard place now. We've already told Woodland Hills that we were going to do this. They went through then and sold their building to Many Rivers Montessori, or as it's in the works. And as far as I know, that's still going on. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. You said you had heard that that is on hold, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, well then it was misinformation that I'd received. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's, as far as I know, that's going on. And it's kind of ironic that Many Rivers Montessori has asked to purchase schools from us. Here a year ago, they offered us to buy secondary technical campus for $3.5 million.
We didn't hear about that.
The public didn't, but I think the Duluth News Tribune eventually did find out about it. But the board was not even, the board wasn't told about it at first either. We found that out afterwards. They didn't even inform the board. The administration. They offered, their latest offer on Nettleton, Many Rivers Montessori offered us $750,000 for Nettleton, and that was not made public. The board decided in closed sessions that we weren't going to consider that because we didn't want to sell to competitors. They had also offered $950,000 for Rockridge, and that was never made public either. I asked them to make it public. I couldn't make it public if they weren't going to. And so now, of course, we can make that public now. Now we were given an opportunity to sell Rockridge for almost $1 million. We turned that down. Now we're going to invest $3 million into fixing it up and keeping it on our school. And just to complicate things, as a school board, we officially closed that school back in 2011. There was a hearing, I believe, in June 2011 that said we were going to close the school. We went through the official closing procedures for that. We had court recorders there. It was a formal process we had to do to close schools. So now we have to go back and say we have to basically rescind that policy or that resolution that was passed at the time.
Well, now, as you're talking, I'm thinking a couple questions here. First of all, it sounds more like the administration's in control than a 7-member board of elected officials, which should have the power over this stuff, and you're not even made aware of what's going on. The administration is keeping that from you. So I'm going to say to the public right now, I hear criticism about the board. What the heck is the school board doing? Well, let me tell you that if the school board doesn't know what's going on, you can't even have a voice in it. When you're elected, you people have elected these school board members. Now, granted, there's 4 people on the board that go along to get along with the superintendent, unlike Art. So you have to keep that in mind as part of the equation here as we look at some of this. Are you going to be paying transportation costs as well?
Yes.
They can walk over from Woodland Hills to Cobb School.
Yes.
And what you're paying in rent, I wonder how many years is it going to take to make up the costs that you're going to have to put into Rock Ridge. I don't have the figures and I'm not good at math. So how many years is it going to take when you figure all the expenses you're going to put into that building and then to keep it going, and you're never going to recoup?
Virtually never. I mean, I've done some real rough figures on it. It's about 20 years. In other words, no. It would take 20 years to pay something back. It's not economically, it's not sound. Now, I like Woodland Hills. They do have a good service. They take basically kids that are in trouble with the law, younger kids, and they're an institution that works basically with troubled youth. And they I think provide a very good program. So, I'm not going to say we're not going to do this. I'm probably not going to vote against it because I can't vote against helping out these kids. But I think that, we were told late about this. I think that Woodland Hills wasn't really open with us about selling to Many Rivers Montessori. There's a lot of issues there. You mentioned about, is it the school board's fault? We really haven't been informed. I mean, I think everybody knows that in town. And school boards, as a rule, at least in Minnesota, are weak. They are not very participatory. Remember, it's basically volunteer. We have bare minimum. I think we get paid $7,000 a year. A lot of school board members get paid nothing around the state. We have no staff. We don't have an office. Everything we get comes from the superintendent. In most cases, you don't even have any knowledge. When I got elected 8 years ago, I came in there and did not have a clue. I'm an engineer, I'm a numbers guy, I'm pretty sharp at that, I'm a contract administrator. And I went in there and I didn't have a clue where the money was coming from, where the money was going. And I just found out, it took me 3 years to find out that we're paying for a lot of our debts for the Red Plan out of the general fund, and they literally denied that. Duluth News Tribune still refuses to print that.
I heard them over and over say that.
Yeah, and they said, oh, there's no money coming out of the general fund, and it took me digging. And of course, remember, they would never talk to us.
You still haven't gotten information that you've asked for requests of information?
I've got about 12 Data Apprentice Act requests that have not even been acknowledged, which is a violation of Minnesota law, obviously.
Oh, well,
they've told me now there is some hope. We have a new CFO, which is a corporate financial officer, they call it. His name is Doug Hasler. He seems to be very much open. Bill Hansen, the former one, resigned, thank goodness. And he would never give us anything. It was like pulling teeth. We got information. It was usually so cloaked in misinformation or so convoluted that he didn't know what it was talking about.
And I heard a lot of that discussion. I mean, you walked away and he went, what did he say?
Yeah.
He would give you a bunch of words.
Right.
But there was no sustenance to it that you could follow what he was talking about.
And, again, the 3 board members that were really nasty people, they did not run, 2 years ago. So with the combination, we've got a board, still a 4-3 board, but occasionally we actually have discussions that have to do with budget. We have got budgets of all the schools. That's one of the things I asked for, is I wanted to have individual school budgets. They would never give that to us. We'd ask, and our budget that we're going to be approving here next month is only on the general fund, but we finally got that broken down by school. The new CFO, Mr. Hasler, I think he knows it's important to address legitimate concerns. What do we do as a school board? We fire and hire the superintendent. We approve budgets, and we change policy, and we're the community interaction. When somebody has an issue, they come to us, and I don't like to micromanage the superintendent, but we tell people what can they do. We listen to people. We try to address their concerns, and there's a lot of them out there. And we try to keep misunderstandings becoming, we try to keep molehills from becoming mountains. And that really helps. That's one of the things we do. So that's our 4 basic functions. So we are supposed to be dealing with budget, and we're supposed to be getting information that we can make sound decisions. As I say, I think we're getting Most school boards across the country are going to talk to the school board member, and they don't have a clue about the budget. They just know what the superintendent tells them. Superintendents run the schools in Minnesota. School boards, in most cases, are nothing but cheerleaders. Hate to say that, but that's the way it is. The Minnesota School Board Association, basically, they work with the Minnesota Association of School Administrators. Most of their policies they work back and forth, and that's the Superintendent Association. And they promote that we should be listening to our superintendent and don't micromanage the superintendent because he knows more than we do. Unfortunately, they know more than we do, but when we we have a $130 million budget, not counting our $300 million construction project. And as a board members, I think we have to be informed. Boards, there are checks and balances on the superintendent, that communication with the school. And that's why we're there. We're not there, I don't think, just to be cheerleaders. We're there to solve problems. If the superintendent is not doing his job, we're there to ask questions. We're there to approve budgets, and if we don't like the budget, we have, I think, an obligation to say that, hey, there's something going on there. And of course, having agenda items, all that stuff is important. So you have to be kind of a digger. It's not an easy job because we're given no staff. We're given virtually no training. Right. The training we get from the Minnesota School Board Association, basically they train us to be cheerleaders. That's it. And our community, the people that elect us, deserve more, I think. We deserve to have discussion. We deserve to have conflict. We deserve to be able to have the wherewithal to resolve those conflicts. And we are a deliberative body, and we should be acting like one, and that's why I'm there. I'm not there to just to accept everything the superintendent tells us to do. I'm there to ask questions. I'm there to say, how are you addressing problems that we've got? If it's enrollment problems, if it's budgets problems, if it's the achievement gap, if it's the Denfeld inequity issues, we want the superintendent to solve that. I'm not an educator. I don't have a doctor's degree in education. I'm an engineer. I'm a very good engineer. I'm a numbers guy. I know how contracts work. And I expect the superintendent to resolve these problems. And that's what we're there as a school board. We're not there to run the school. We're there to make sure the school is being ran properly.
Well, those are good things to be hearing from you because I'm sure that a lot of people don't understand. I'm in an elected position myself. I'm a board member, and we should be listening to each other. And I'm afraid the same thing goes on in the elected position I'm in. It's like, go along, get along, just let's get done with this and out the door. And I remember when the superintendents were interviewed here a few years ago when we had 6 candidates. I remember the one from, I believe it was Brainerd, maybe St. Cloud area.
Bemidji, actually.
Bemidji, thank you. You got a better memory on some things. He said, I want you to realize that I am not your boss, you are my boss. So there's hope for one school district in the state of Minnesota who doesn't have a superintendent that lauds it over everybody that I am in charge. This superintendent needs to listen because there are 7 minds on that board with hopefully, it seems like 4 think one way only, but there are 7 minds that have experience in life and different things. They have the children in schools, some of them, that he should be listening, and he should be accepting the information that you have and considering it. Maybe he doesn't have to do everything that you think should be done, but he certainly needs to consider it because why even have 7 board members? If that's not a give and take situation, I don't know what it is. And that, to me, is what government is all about. It's a representation of elected officials working with an administration, and we should be working in a situation where we are willing to listen. Whether you like that person or not, you should be willing to listen to what they have to say and maybe consider that maybe their idea is a good one. Let's try it. But let's go on now, Art, and talk about the mulch issue. Where are we at with that? Because we'd started out with a few $100,000, and now we went up to 1.2 million or something. What happened about that?
Okay, well, this is my opinion, is that the administration did not want to do this. There's some legitimate reasons for that. We do have money issues, and that there is a concern. The parents group are very well organized. They're very caring, and they did a lot of research. There's some people say that, oh, the mulch isn't that bad. This is shredded tires, and some people say it is. I supported them removing that because this was a parent group that was clearly engaged, that they have had fundraisers, they have done everything they could to go back and help us, like finding good contractors, finding affordable contractors. And so it took us almost 6 months. That was before we were able to get agenda items on. But finally, the administration agreed to meet with them and consider them. They brought in a person from the state that kind of poo-hooed the idea. Of course, that's what the administration done. So I think they clearly didn't want to listen to these parents. That's their prerogative. I mean, that's a legitimate point of view. I don't agree with that, but that's why we had a debate. And so we came up, finally, we started to address this. We finally started addressing it, I think, last November. And we finally had a group. They were supposed to come together. The school hired a consultant. The original estimate was like $600,000, and that's for 11 playgrounds. I thought it was kind of high myself, but they were going to go out and bid. They were supposed to be putting optional bid items in there so we could maybe get a better price, give some time spans on there. Well, the price that came in turned out it was like 1.2 million. And that was literally everybody on the board, I think, was kind of in shock because first of all, though, that money, our new CFO, he found out that we could take that out. It's called long-term facilities money. And that means this comes from the taxpayer. It's a tax levy, a local tax levy, but it wasn't coming out of the classroom. So that made us happy. I don't like to see a tax increase, but nonetheless, it had to come from somewhere if we're going to do it. And remember, the parents were doing fundraisers and everything. But still, $1.2 million, I wasn't going to support that. And so the consultant got a lot of static from the one meeting, and we had a meeting of the minds. The community group really worked with the administration. I think they come up with a better alternative, and that's going out to bid now, and we're waiting for new bids to come in with changing it. I'm still expecting these bids to come in at $600,000, not at 1.2 million. And we won't know. The parents group is working to get local contractors to bid on this because that's key to get people that want to help. I mean, we do that a lot in schools. We have a lot of volunteer. We get donations. I'm not saying it's going to be donations, but say Stowe School, they work with a community. Gary New Duluth, they've built their new community center down there, and a lot of it's through just local contractors are helping out. So we're hoping to get some of that working with the community. We wanted to pay these local businesses, of course, too. So we're waiting now what's going to happen. I'm thinking the Duluth News Tribune has repeatedly ridiculed this idea, which I think is sad. Hey, what else would you expect from the Duluth News Tribune? I think that why I hear the debate, is that a good thing to do financially? We have so many other things that we are wasting money on in our school, and I'm hoping you ask about the budget. That's an exact example. We're throwing away literally millions and millions of dollars per year for things that we should not be doing. And if we can't spend $600,000 to fix our playgrounds that the parents really want, I mean, some of these parents have said, if we don't do this, they're going to leave the school.
And some of them already have.
Already have, yes. We had one, some of the parents were so frustrated that we were taking so long to respond as a board. This was administration refused to put it on the agenda. And we literally lost some of them very strong parents. And I talked to one of them. I seen him over at Fitgers the other day, and I said, hey, they pulled their kids out. So I think we have to listen to our parents. I think they have a legitimate concern. both the playground monitors, the parents, and the teachers have expressed a concern.
Legitimate
about
concerns.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people don't agree with that. They think, gee, so what? Well, I say that I think we have to we have to be, in this case, it's best to be a little caution and have some precaution here. And some of these people are very adamant that this is not good. They come back looking covered with black soot, and the smell is really bad.
Especially
and so it's
on
something we
heat,
should
yeah.
be doing, I think. I think it's something we should be doing. If we can't afford $600,000, like there's something wrong with our school. And I mean, there is something wrong with our school, but this should be something that we could have covered very easily. If we would have had sound financial management over the last 8 years since I've been on the school board, we would not even have to go to the taxpayers to pay for this.
Well, and I'm sorry I interrupted you there, but when you have parents who are playground monitors and they are there with the children, and on those occasional hot days in May or in the fall of the year, the heat from the sun and the tire, it's a very toxic area where you just smell that odor coming up, and these kids are playing in it, and then they come out of there, like you say, with soot. Their clothes are all a mess. Whatever happened to us old tough people that grew up when you fell on cement or pavement or dirt? And gee, I'm still alive to tell you about it, because I was a tomboy when I was a kid. And so, I mean, I was on those monkey bars. What few things we had was monkey bars and swings, teeter-totters. We didn't die. You know, we didn't wear helmets to play on the playground. We got a little bump, but we learned from one or two missteps that, hey, you know, we can't act like that, and otherwise we're going to hurt more. And I mean, so now we're busy protecting these kids from every little thing. That why don't we put pea gravel in there? Wood chips rot, tire mulch stinks and is dirty, and what about pea rock? I mean, pea rock is a lot simpler to fall into than a paved area or dirt. So maybe that's something to think about. But yeah, let's talk a bit about the budget. Certainly there are some major problems there, and I heard a man call into a radio program the other day who happens to be in the transportation department, a bus driver. He said, you know what, we're taking these kids everywhere. They're on field trip after field trip after field trip. So he would like to see a lot less field trips, because we got kids getting to the 12th grade and they don't know how to read, so they're not in the classroom very often. So every time we lose a student to a school district that's giving their kids a good education, they get out of 12th grade, they know how to read, they're in the classroom obviously more than ours are, and they're out of our districts, which means how many thousands of dollars per each student we lose. So our deficit grows bigger. And so how are we solving the problem? I was there, 2 months ago and filmed, and it was a very shadow budget at the time. Didn't include anything about pay raises for teachers or anybody else. So where are we at now with the budget, and how are we going to solve it? Are we going to the taxpayers and saying, you know what, we have the authority to just levy more money. We don't need to go to you and ask you anymore because of the state law that came through. So where are we at?
First I'll address you questioned the transportation. I'm not worried about that as much as you are, and this is the reason why. We actually have a dedicated funds for transportation. It's a funds we get from the state. It's a fairly sizable amount. Now, I mean, yes, of course, it doesn't mean we should squander our transportation costs, but the transportation is not an issue why we have financial problems. It's a totally different fund, and that is a dedicated fund that comes from the state. Every school in the state gets it. I think it's important to be able to allow kids to get out on field trips. I really think that's important. And other schools do it. For example, Renshaw, Proctor, and Hermantown all send their buses down into Duluth. So they have, of course, they get students for that too, and they get a lot of our students, which is one of the reasons we have issues. But they have money to do it. They can afford to do that. And in fact, I would go to the point in saying this is one of the issues that people in Denfeld are concerned. I think we should be doing more busing. Right now, our policies say that if kids live within 2 miles of the school, they have to provide their own transportation. And I think that should be lowered down. I think we should be sending kids at least to pick up our own students. I'd like to see that lowered down to 1 mile, because the transportation really is not an issue. I think it's a service that we can provide, and I think field trips and stuff, yeah, I mean, we don't want to be foolish about it, but I think in this case, transportation is really not a big issue.
Okay.
I'd like to see us doing better, of course, giving more services to our students and parents. And for example, Lincoln Park Middle School, it's hard to get to, although there's been talk about getting DTA, taking buses up there, but some people have a hard time getting there, and students do. And Denfeld, it's a 2-mile limit now. And that's when it's 20 below and blowing outside, some kids don't like to walk, and I think that we should consider lowering that limit to give a little more service to our local kids. Okay, that's the transportation. Oh, the budget you mentioned. Where are we at on the budget? We have to approve a budget next month. You're correct, we haven't been given a lot of information about our budget. It's always been pretty skimpy, and when we have a declining population, enrollment I should say, that budget goes down. The budget we were given was a $2.5 million deficit. You're absolutely correct. You were there at that meeting. That was assuming no increase, pay increase, and the teachers were starting to talk about negotiations. I'm assuming we're going to have a 2% pay raise. That's what they've always asked, and I'm not opposed to that, because teachers should get pay raises like everybody else gets. But it shows that the $2.5 million deficit is probably going to be higher than that. And they were also hoping we're going to get an increase in the formula, they call it, from the state. And that's probably not going to happen. There were also issues about a pension. Remember, the Duluth Teachers Retirement Association was basically bankrupt here 2 years ago. They merged with the Teachers Retirement Association, which is a statewide group. And the legislature promised at the time that they would kick in money to because the Duluth Teachers Association was virtually bankrupt and didn't have enough money to cover their costs. So the statewide organization absorbed them, only with the understanding that there would be money coming in from the state. The first year, the state legislature kicked in, I think, $15 million, and they were supposed to do that for, I think, 4 years. That was the agreement. Well, this year, of course, they decided not to do that, the legislature, which I don't blame them. Why should the legislature bail out a pension fund? I'm not quite sure, without having some discussion. Yeah. But nonetheless, the state, it looks like, is not going to do that. So that means the school is going to have to pay more in for the pension, and the teachers are too. But that's another drain that was not considered, in the deficit, and that's not a big amount of money. I think it's $400,000 additional that we're going to have to kick in for retirement this year compared to last year. But everything adds up. The teachers, if we give a 2% increase on that, that's going to be about $1 million right there, and that wasn't included. And also, you mentioned, we talked about Rockridge already. Well, part of that money is apparently going to come out of the general fund, so that's another $600,000 there. Now, they did include that in their initial budget because we were looking at that. But is that going to be enough? I think our deficit, we've already tried to deal with the deficit. We're talking about reducing positions, and And that's how you deal with it. It's about all we've got. We can't do much else. It's about all we can do. The only way we can save money is to reduce positions. And that, to me, that's painful because we have large class sizes already. And of course, what everybody should be asking, and it's so embarrassing to see like the Duluth News Tribune just do such a horrible job on reporting on this. You see their editorials as, oh my gosh, the tire mulch that's we can't do that. That's foolish. They've never talked about the real reason we have a deficit. What's the real reason? I've told you this before, Marcia, and I'll say it again, is that when the red plan was done, of course we have to pay for our debts. We did not bond for that. We put out what's called certificates of participation. Your viewers should look that up. Certificates of participation are kind of like bonding, except for a couple big differences. The first one is there's less accountability to the public on that. Governments often do that without, in our case, didn't have a referendum. That was one reason they did that. It was that they could do that without having the accountability. And the other big thing that does is that that's a higher interest rate. So we have one bond and we have 7 COPs, they call them, certificates of participation. Literally, our effective interest rate for all those debts, remember we had $320 million in building, and that was mostly all bonded, and we were supposed to get some from building sales. That didn't happen either. That's another topic. And so here we have high interest rates, 4%. Even when we entered into this 8 years ago, 4% was high for municipal school type bonds. And one reason COPs are a high rate because some of them are not guaranteed by the taxpayer. So there's a lot of reasons that we paid, our bond rating is among, in fact, I think we may be the lowest bond rating in the state. So because one reason is because we did COPs. COPs drops your bond rating down. So here we are, we're paying 4% interest. Okay, now topping that off, the legal advice that we got, I was in the minority, of course. The legal advice that the school board got that was promoted by the former superintendent is that we were going to pay some of this out of the general fund. So not only are we paying high interest rates, some of this is literally coming out of the general fund.
Which is what is supposed to be used to operate the schools.
Why the teachers union isn't doing something, our main cost in the general fund is paying our teachers. I mean, that's the way it should be, I think. I want to pay our teachers good money. But we're paying $3 million out, $3.3 million this year. For a while, we were paying $8 million per year out of the general fund. And the Duluth News Tribune still has refused to report on that. They complain about the mulch. When we're pulling millions of dollars out of the general fund based on poor legal advice, poor financial advice. And we are addressing that. I'm going to be having a resolution coming up here which is going to formally direct, I'm hoping that it passes administration to look into alternatives on this. And the biggest alternative is 4%. We're paying 4% interest. I mean, if you take all these bonds as an average, about 4% is our effective interest rate. That sounds like not a lot if you're buying a house, but for bonding, for municipal bonding, that's high. Right now, other schools, I've talked to the bonds sellers, it's not unusual to get a 2% interest rate. So 2% versus 4%, even if we go 3%, we're paying about, right now, the total payments that we make per year is about $25 million per year. $3 million of that's coming out of the general fund. The other is coming from taxation. So if we refinance that, it would be easy to, all I got to do is look up in the amortization table, and we could drop our payments from $25 million down to about $20 million per year. That would mean no more money out of the general fund, and it would actually may result, if we got good legal advice and good financial advice, it would actually result in a decrease in taxation. It's that simple, Marcy. And this is a no-brainer. So you're going to ask me, why aren't we doing that? Well,
That's exactly what my next question was. Where's your opposition in looking at this?
well, our opposition, believe it or not, is from the, not believe it or not, is, but it didn't make a sense, as the lawyers that dreamed up this scheme in the first place.
Of course.
They say, yeah, we have a lawyer, Freiberger Buchanan, who says, oh, we can't do that because we wrote these COPs such that you could not cash them in early and refinance. I'm looking at him and saying, huh? What do you mean? We're stuck with this high interest rates, and you forced us to go through legal channels if we're going to have to get down to what should be a reasonable interest rate. I mean, to me, I think that's bordering on certainly incompetence, if not malpractice. It has been a detriment to our school. Since the red plan started, literally, Marcia, we have pulled this year, it's going to be $37 million out of the general fund to pay for debts. I think that's illegal personally. I've talked to the Attorney General and they say, oh, you're an independent school district, you can do anything you want. Well, where are the teachers? Why aren't the teachers screaming bloody murder about this? Why did anybody agree to this in the first place? And if we don't change this, we're going to be paying, over the next 10 years, we're going to be paying another $50 million out of the general fund. And people wonder why we have a deficit, why we can't afford 7-period days, why we can't lower our class size by hiring more teachers. That's exactly why. Why can't we address the equity gap between Denfeld and East High School? Why can't we address the achievement gap between kids of color and our white students, which incidentally is one among the worst in the state? And why can't we address any of this stuff? It's not what the Duluth News Tribune says. It's not because we're replacing our tire molds. It's because we have been crippled by poor legal advice and poor financial advice.
So I guess then the solution is, come this election year, which is this fall, you have to, you the people that are listening to this and all of the taxpayers in this area that are in the school district, and you have to carefully vet anybody that's running for this district and find out where they stand on this type of issue, because you have the authority to, and I've been there, you have the authority to change out the attorneys, and yet the last reorganization meeting, if you want to even call it that, they don't do much reorganizing, but that's the thing they call it at the beginning of the year in January, is you choose your legal representation and what banks you're using and et cetera, et cetera. So if you have, and there are 4 positions up for the election this year, there's 2 at-large positions, arts position, and the 1st district, which Rosie Loeffler Kemp has been a strong advocate for the unions, which keep silent and don't protest any of this. And yet you would think that the teachers would be upset, because they're the ones that are losing their jobs. They're the ones that are sitting there with overcrowded classrooms. They're the ones that are suffering under an administration that doesn't seem to want to deal with these issues of inequity. And I mean, I heard 2 teachers from Denfeld, and I happen to know these 2 young men, say that when they come to us with a 5th grade education, we can't change that problem in a year and a half left when they get them in 11th grade in the math and sciences, and they cannot read past 5th grade. Those teachers are having to deal with a problem. Why aren't they speaking up on behalf of getting some of these changes? It's really interesting that they keep silent, but it's to the detriment of these poor young people that are going out there ill-equipped. I mean, to me, that is one of the major atrocities of some of this stuff that you've been explaining, is these children are going out into the public, they're not properly educated. And what's going to happen to them? Are they going to turn to drugs, prostitution, crime? What is going to happen to these students? That's the issue that we're dealing with here. These lives are at stake, and there's got to be some changes. And I do really support what Art has done. I've been working with him all these years that he's been on the board. He's been a strong advocate for the public. So Art, you've explained some, now I understand the bonding issue in these COPs. I finally have got it. It's taken me a few years to get it, but thank you for explaining that. Yeah, we need to lower that interest, and that would seem to me would be the first thing the board should do once it's been elected and you've got some people that are not stalling and playing games, is to change out your way of doing business, hopefully to rescind that at least 2% of that interest that we're just paying out there for some bonding company.
Well, it's hard to get people to understand this, and when we entered into these COPs should be a red flag to anybody that's listening. If your city, now a lot of these financial, they call them financial companies, there's several in the state that cater to schools and municipalities. COPs seem to be a big thing. I haven't quite figured out why. I guess because they make more money off them, I don't know. But we don't have a standard. You know, your house payments, you pay $500 a month for 30 years, whatever it happens to be, you pay it off. Well, these things, I call them variable arms, variable rate mortgages. It's kind of similar to that. Okay, it's not different. These are not houses. It's quite a bit legally different, of course. But they do the same thing. Some of these ones that we didn't even make payments for 4 years on the one. And that kept accumulating interest.
Of course.
Why did they do that? The only reason I can think of is that they did not want to scare the public off by raising their taxes so much. And that's the only reason I can think of. And then to top it off, and this is the way COPs work, I've been talking to lawyers and financial advisors and CPAs about this because it's a big issue, is the way they do it, these people that are selling these COPs, is they have really low payments, sometimes none in the start, and then they balloon up. About 2/3 of the way through, our payments in 5 years are going to be $35 million. And that is the way they do it on COPs. On bonds, it's different. So they keep playing with the interest rates. I have no idea why. As far as I can see, it's a complete rip-off to the public. A bunch of these COP holders, they call them leaseholders actually. I don't know who they are. It's not like selling bonds. It's different. And it is really a financial rip-off to our school district. And how has that happened? Because extremely poor financial advisors and extremely poor legal advice that we got from, in this case, local lawyers.
Well, and I sat there and I listened to those meetings, filming it, and I always had that attitude when I came away from there that whoever spoke to them, they were the authority, they were the experts, and we just have to believe everything you said. And they did not do their homework. So they got us into this mess, and we can thank the former superintendents, the current superintendent, and some former board members, and now 4 that go along to get along. We can thank them for the mess that we're in. And what it's going to take is like I said, it's going to take keeping Art on there who understands this, and it's time to get rid of those that go along to get along. Rosie Loeffler-Kemp is one of them. She has done nothing but just, okay, whatever you say, I believe you and I'm just going to support you, and then she votes that way. So just in a couple minutes left, Art, we need to wrap this up now. Is there anything quickly pressing that you see coming up at the next school board meeting on the 3rd Tuesday of the month that people need to be aware of?
Well, there's two things coming up here shortly. On June 5th, which is a week from next Monday, we have called a special meeting, or it's actually committee of the whole, to listen to the Denfeld people, the Denfeld staff and the Denfeld parents. They've really presented some of the issues. We didn't talk much about Denfeld. We have a lot of inequities. We have there's 1,500 students at East, there's 900 at Denfeld. That has caused a lot of lesser opportunities for students to be able to take classes.
Lots of
conflicts. Wow. Remember, we only have 6 period days, not 7 like everybody else around us has. So it's been a detriment, and they are trying to address that. And I brought that up. We have a large achievement gap in Denfeld. We have a poor graduation rate. And believe it or not, Marcia, I'm going to say this, and I don't know if you know this, but Denfeld graduated the least number of graduates last year since it was built in 1926.
That sends chills up my spine. That's my alma mater. We had 1,500 kids in there when I went to school, and most of us graduated. That is appalling. I am just sickened to hear that, Art. That's just terrible.
I mean, we have to address this as a school district.
Yes.
And, for example, they talk about graduation rates. We have a very high-paid person in the school, I won't mention any names, that talks about us. Never once did she ever tell us that about the poor graduation numbers in Denfeld. The rates are bad enough. Percentage-wise, we're down to something like 75% of kids are graduating from Denfeld. But the numbers, too, it's like, what are we doing? So Denfeld, that's coming up June 5th.
Okay.
At 4:30, and that's a special called Committee of the Whole. We're not going to make decisions. We're going to listen to the Denfeld people. I've been advocating for them because obviously we have to do something as a school.
Will that be in the boardroom? We just have a minute now.
Yes.
Okay, they'll be in the boardroom. So that's at Old Central High School on the second floor. Plan to attend. You'll be able to hear people finally coming out and saying what's really going on. And, we're going to have you back again because
thank you.
This is not the end of the story. It's kind of stay tuned for the next episode. Art, I really appreciate your coming in today. And like I said, I support the fact that you're running again. Hats off to you because you've been a stalwart fighter, and I really appreciate your staying in there and keeping on. So
thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today, folks. Bye now.